Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us wherever you're joining us. If you're here in Santa Barbara, California at TV Santa Barbara, we welcome you. If you're joining us from all around the world at goodlifetelevision.org, we're so glad you're with us. So many of you are finding us at goodlifetelevision.org, and you're also finding our podcast. So if you want to work out and listen to us while you work out or drive or whatever, you can find us on all the different podcast platforms at Good Life Conversations. So keep that in mind. We've had some wonderful people, wonderful stories. We've had people of all walks of life. One of the things that we're trying to do here at Good Life is to highlight and dwell on the good. And there's so much good that's happening, and there's so many people that you've never heard of that are doing and have done extraordinary things. And there's so much goodness. So that's what we're here to talk about, and it's really fitting for my guest today. Corey Branchflower is with me. Corey is the president and founder of Shelter Care Resources in Ventura County. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's so incredible to read about what you've done and your husband and your heart. And so I want to get to that in a second, but I thought we'd start with just kind of your background. I think you were born and raised in the Los Angeles area, but tell us a little bit about kind of where you came from and your family.
I was actually born in Los Angeles and raised in Pomona, which is out in the Inland Empire,
Yep.
and raised in church. It was a small church, and we had a pretty, I wouldn't say large because it was a small church, but an urban ministry. My parents were very involved in ministry, and we always reached out to people who were in need. And so I grew up kind of with this background of understanding that our goal as Christians is not just to serve God, but also to serve others.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? That's so powerful what small churches can do. I mean, and when you think about how many of them are out there, that's one of the things I like talking about on the program is just all these little pockets of people that come together because of their heart's been changed or their whatever, and they want to serve and they want to love people. So that's so you were raised with that. I mean, that was kind of in your heart early on.
Yeah, and I think in my family's heart also, yes. And I think when you have that in your history, then it kind of becomes a part of you. That no matter what you do as an occupation, you always have that in you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. So you and your husband Rob's is he a pastor at Calvary?
He's one of the pastors at Calvary Chapel, Oxnard. Yes.
Okay, Calvary Chapel, Oxnard. So you guys felt called to Oxnard, or if I'm remembering the story right, you moved in 2004, and you just started working with some low-income students. Take us back to that point in the story.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really amazing story because at the time I'd finished my credential for teaching, and my husband says, oh, I really feel like God is leading us to Oxnard, and it was July. And I had a job lined up, and I said, you know that all the teachers get hired in like February, right? So there's no way they're gonna, hire me in July. I have, fortunately, an English credential and a music credential. My primary background was band directing, right? And they only usually have one band director per campus, and those jobs are usually full. So I told him, look, if I call out there and I can get a job, great, I'll understand that God is calling us. But otherwise, what's going to happen? We're both going to have to work to afford to live out there. And so I called the school, and the school, whoever was sitting at the desk wasn't who normally sat at the desk. I said, hey, I'm just wanted to know if you guys are hiring anybody for the upcoming year. And I do have an English credential. And she said, oh, well, you don't happen to teach music, do you? Yeah. And she said, because our music director just quit 2 days ago, and we need somebody. We have nobody. And so at that time, I was like, wow, we fully knew that the Lord had called us to come out here. And so we did. We moved out, and I began working at this way more urban school. I went from teaching kids that were more on like a prodigy level to this school that was in the inner city and had a completely different demographic, and it was like culture shock having to learn all over again how to do the job.
Wow. And so you started working with students at that point.
Right.
And then so take us to the fostering part of your story. We were talking before we came on. You've fostered, I guess, 13 kids in your home.
Right.
And you've adopted 5.
Right. Right.
How in the world did you do that?
So where it really started was, as a band director, you really live and breathe that job. And I had kids who were so talented, and yet they just didn't have the resources. They didn't have, the support at home. And I would come to school at 6 a.m. They would be there at 6. I would leave at 5. They'd still be there at 5. And I think I began to see that, teaching the students isn't enough. They need parents. And I felt so much for these students that, I talked to my husband, and we prayed together about fostering. I just said, there's so many kids out there that just need parents.
Yeah.
And that's how we started fostering. We started taking kids in about 2006.
Wow, one at a time. You just...
Yeah, we started with school age because we both worked, and I thought, yeah, since I'm a teacher, they can kind of be on my schedule. And we took them in, so between the ages of 7 and 9 originally. And we wound up taking all boys because it's easier. You have requirements regarding who can stay in what room with whom. And so it's easier sometimes if you take one gender, unless you have 10 rooms in your house, because otherwise you have to constantly switch them around.
Oh.
Right, so we took in 3 boys while I was working there at that middle school, and our 3rd son had type 1 diabetes. And at that point, his medical care was pretty intense, and so was some of the behavior we were dealing with. And as a foster parent, you get trained on the behavior. As a teacher, you get trained on behavior, but there are certain things that you really can't comprehend unless you actually do the job. It's way different to do the job with kids who have intense behaviors in the classroom and know at the end of the day, I'm going home.
Right.
I'm going to drink my coffee, have my dinner. When you take those kids in, that's there with you 24/7.
Wow.
It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And it's a difficulty on a level that, like I said, it's unless you actually do it, you can't even understand it. It's very difficult. Yeah.
Wow. And so, in addition to that, Shelter Care Resources was born at some point. You and your husband has decided to start Shelter Care Resources. And just for those who aren't familiar with it, it was founded as a means of assisting and encouraging foster parents. Incorporated in 2016 and an office opened in 2021. I want to get into the details of what Shelter Care does, but talk to us about the decision for you to do something more for other parents.
When I quit my job at the middle school, and I did this in 2010, both with the health of our 3rd son, and, we felt like we weren't sure if our kids would make it through the public school environment. We couldn't afford to put them in private school, so I thought, I'm going to quit. I'm going to take care of our 3rd son, and we're going to homeschool these kids. And at the same time, my husband felt called to leave the job that he was pastoring at the church that he was at, and he became a recruiter for Koinonia Foster Family Agency, and that was the agency that we were working with.
Yeah.
And that was, totally God having opened up that door for him after we basically both quit with nowhere to go. And so as I was homeschooling the kids, we took in a 4th son in 2011, and we almost decertified, except that we were going to take that 4th son into guardianship, and he said, no, I want to be adopted, which meant that it's a longer process. And it was, again, God has just intervened in so many miraculous ways, because if he had not said that and we would have decertified, we wouldn't have our youngest son, Jay. And that was the entire thing that kicked off us starting Shelter Care, because at the time, my husband was trying to recruit for people to take babies, and normally everyone wants to take babies, and all of a sudden nobody wanted to take babies. We thought, well, why not? Why is the sudden change? And so I said, well, we can do it. We still have enough room in our room. We can put a crib. So we had filled up our bedrooms, but the rule was that under 2 years old, you can put them in your room in a crib. So I said, okay, we can do this. And we asked to be certified for one more child. And we actually took in a couple of babies before Jay, or one before and then one during. But then we started doing that, and at the time we started taking them in, I realized every time the baby comes in, you basically have to throw yourself your own baby shower. You know, it's so funny. When we got the call for Jay, we were in the Target shopping for school supplies with my older kids. They called us and said, well, you have 45 minutes, you have a new baby coming. And we didn't have anything for a baby because we gave it all away with the last baby who went away. And so my sons and I were running through the Target and grabbing everything and throwing it in the cart. And I knew nothing. One of my sons worked in the church nursery, and I had to ask him, what do they eat? I said, what do they eat? What do we put in here? And so the boys were helping me fill the cart.
Oh
and
gosh.
I realized at that moment, I was like, well, this is why people can't take them, because it's like stressful and expensive, and you know, all the stuff goes out the minute the new baby comes in before you even get your reimbursement. So that was really what kicked it off. I thought, you know, we need to do something because these children deserve a home. And if all of this is just materials that stand in the way, well, shoot, I mean, we'll just start collecting materials and encouraging people to take the babies, and basically saying, you know, if you will take a child, we will come alongside of you the entire time you have that child. We will provide whatever you need for them. We will, I mean, whatever you need. Even if you need us to watch them and go out somewhere, I mean, it was whatever we can do, you know, to be able to bring in these children.
So the purpose is to support and assist families that might not otherwise take a child in.
That is correct.
And so you do it you have a community closet, you have a food pantry, you have all kinds of stuff going on to support those families, right?
That is correct, right? Yes.
And then how did you get volunteers, or who helped you with this?
Well, yeah, we started off with my first post. I made a Facebook page, and that's all I could think to do. I made a Facebook page, and I invited all my friends, and I said, hey, I'm starting this program, and does anyone mind donating baby stuff? And I literally started this with 2 packing boxes of infant clothing. And I cleared out some space in my garage, stuck them on a shelf, and we started with 2 boxes. That was it. And I just kept asking more people, and you know, a lot of my friends were like, oh yeah, you know, my baby stuff is still here, I'll bring it. And we, you know, eventually had a whole shelf full. And then as we got more and more shelves and more clothing, we needed more and more people to help sort it. And so we would call on American Heritage Girls, Boy Scouts. You know, our church at the time had a Boy Scout troop. And so just call in volunteers to come and help sort the clothing so we could put it on the shelves. And so that's basically how we started.
That became the community closet.
Right. And then we collected even things like car seats and swings, and you know, whatever we could bring in, even older kids' clothing, whatever we could give to the foster parents who were assisting. Yeah.
And so how many people are you helping now every year?
Oh my goodness. So I mean, between the start, which was in 2012, and now, I mean, we have gone from those 2 paper boxes to the shelves. Then we moved into storage units with 1 storage unit. And then we had 4 and 5 and then 11 storage units. And then we were calling in more and more volunteers. And then when the pandemic hit, it was really funny because we were searching for an office at that point and didn't feel like it was God's timing. And that was about 2019. And then, of course, 2020, the pandemic hit. And we had 11 storage units full of stuff. And it was like, I told everyone, it was like Joseph. We were just like filling up the silos. And everyone shut down except for there was no regulation for storage units. So we were like the underground Walmart. And we had a lot of people that were contributing to our cause because we were kind of like the only boat to float in this little area. And at that point, yeah, we were open.
Yeah.
And we even had like toilet paper and hand sanitizer, which is completely comical. But then at that point, we got enough support. You know, we had people giving us their entire stimulus checks. And it was so amazing how God just brought that through. And then when that was all over, we opened the office downtown, which is now serving, I mean, every school district, even Ventura County Office of Education, Public Health, Clinicas, Children and Family Services. If there is an agency in Oxnard that deals with people, we are partnering with them right now. And we have at this point served over 500,000 meals. I think it's almost 600,000 meals. And over 15,000 people, I think I wrote. I had to run the numbers today because I can't even remember. And honestly, during the pandemic, we weren't even counting, so I don't even know. But I know that on record, it's about 15,000 people served through the closet as a whole.
And the food part, the food pantry, is it like Friday nights or something? People can come?
Yes, it's at Calvary Chapel, Oxnard. They're, obviously one of our great supporters. We get 38 volunteers a week who are just amazing, who've given up their time every Friday to go and work. And it's a drive-through, so people just come in and they put a number on the car, and then they just have the cars go out and order and put the food in their trunk. And we serve about between 120 and 140 cars a week. It's every week, except for there's a few weeks out of the year where Food Share is doing inventory. Christmas and New Year's landed on a Friday, but it's about 48 weeks out of the year that we're open. So every Friday, 5:15 to 6:30 p.m. at Calvary Chapel, Oxnard. It's 1925 Eastman Avenue in Oxnard.
So just to back up, so Shelter Care Resources, sheltercareresources.com is the website. The mission to provide resources and materials that promote health, well-being, and education to our county's foster, kinship, and at-risk children and youth. And then it also says you're available to assist children and youth in foster resource care, youth in crisis, pregnancy, and homeless children and families. You make a special emphasis on kind of this homeless youth boys program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when we moved into serving the homeless, it was because we met together with a bunch of similar organizations and Christian people. We prayed together about whether we felt like there was some area that was not being covered, like we were all serving foster. And we have felt like so many of the foster kids come because of general neglect. Many of those because the parents are homeless. And so we kind of crossed over into helping the homeless families as a way of sort of slowing the traffic of the kids coming in via general neglect. So now we have a strong outreach to homeless families, helping them take care of their children, in very much the same way you do with the foster parents, which is providing basic necessities, being a connection of support to them, and even a mediator between the schools and the families. Sometimes they lose connection with them. But in particular, we've started an outreach to homeless youth boys because when we try to help families get into shelters, many of the shelters have an age limit of age 10 for boys, which makes it very difficult for a family who has a teen boy or even a boy over 10, 11 years old, because they would have to split the family to get them into a shelter, and sometimes that isn't even an option. Even when it is an option, it's not a good option.
Right.
So what we did was we got some seed money from the Oxnard Police Department to be able to pay for motels for this little bridge program where we put them up in a motel and then we take several days to do some paperwork and figure out how to best process them and where would be the best place to send them and how to help them. And then we communicate with their school district to say, hey, by the way, this kid hasn't been coming to school. Here's where he is. Don't lose connection. And make sure the kid stays in school. That's a huge part of our mission, is making sure that the kids can continue their education and break the cycle of poverty.
Yeah. This is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You're a machine. I can't, I'm trying to keep up with this in my mind, like everything you're doing.
We have the most amazing group of volunteers, and I'm so blessed. Lots of retired teachers and people from all walks of life, and real estate agents and property management, and all these different areas where we can kind of draw from their expertise and learn how to best house the kids, how to best serve them. I mean, people in psychology. And so really, it's just our village. Our village is amazing.
It sounds to me like you've kind of made a decision based on what you felt called to do. You've kind of stepped out to do it. And it sounds to me like when you did that, God has met your needs.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, and yeah, that's another just so many amazing stories. When my husband and I both quit with nowhere to go, we knew there was a conundrum because we're laying our house on the line and we needed the house to support the foster kids.
Right.
And we both went, well, this is what we know we're called to do. And it really was that moment where you step out into, it was like Moses stepping into the water, because we're like, we got nothing. And
where are you going? I have no idea.
This is insane. So we were down to the last payment for our house, and we weren't going to make the mortgage. And we thought, if the house goes into foreclosure, we'll have to just believe that God will provide. And as we made the last mortgage payment, my husband pulls up the computer and I hear him yell, and I'm like, run upstairs, and there has been a $30,000 child tax credit because we adopted 3 kids. $30,000 dropped in from the IRS out, basically the IRS. You're like, who thinks that God will use the IRS?
The IRS doesn't normally give you money.
Right, and just so many things like that where at every step we went, God, I don't know what you're thinking, so I just hope this is going to be okay. And it was just miracle after miracle, and even now, I haven't taken a salary the entire 10 years. I got one stipend at one point, and that was it. But every time you go, you know what, God, it's not about money. I don't think people should measure their life by what they get, but what they give. We give and God gives back, and you cannot outgive God. No matter what you do, you can give up your life, your house, everything. God will always come through, and He'll always give more.
That's beautiful. What a story. And how are all the kids doing that are in your house?
Good. I mean, the 4 older are grown now, and the oldest one is waiting tables in Chicago. The second one is married, and we're about to be grandparents, so we're super excited. And then our third son is working. He does an arcade business where he services the arcades, and then our fourth one is in the Army. So they're all working, they're all supporting themselves, and these are kids that if you had met them back then, I mean, you would have no idea. So we're very proud of all of them, and we're just more than anything grateful to God, because it is impossible. It is an impossible job.
Yeah, and you've done this just because you want to. You're motivated by love for other people. I mean, you say it so matter-of-factly, like, well, these kids deserve a place to live. I mean, a lot of people would say that, but you've actually done something about this.
Yeah, I think if you desire to serve God the way that a lot of people say they do, and you put your time in prayer and the Word, and you are really, really desiring, to lay things down and say, God, I'm going to do what you've called me to do, whatever that is. If you have a genuine desire, God will call you on it. And it's funny you say, well, did you want to? Well, no, actually. In many circumstances, no. It was, God says to do something, and you say, really? And you ask for confirmation upon confirmation and fleece upon fleece. And as God continues to give you that confirmation, you're like, okay, and you do it. And I think the wanting to comes as those first steps are being made, right? As you are willing, and the Bible says, in the book of James, when you ask in faith with nothing wavering, nothing. I mean, you take that step out into midair, and you just go, I'm going to believe, even if everything around me seems like I shouldn't. And the wanting comes in as God's confirmation comes in, and you're so overwhelmed and overpowered by the Holy Spirit and what God is doing that you can't help but be excited about what you're doing. So the God works the miracle, and you're like, wow, what's coming next? And living that life is so exciting, so amazing.
Wow. Well, I would encourage people to check out sheltercareresources.com if you want to help out, if you want to volunteer, if you want to give. But Corey, it's really an honor to meet you.
Thank you. You too.
What a life. Incredible work. So thanks for what you've done.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.